We're here with Jesse Chrisp. He's an attorney in California. He has a very well-known practice in the North State in the areas of Wine Country, in the area of San Francisco, Sonoma, Santa Rosa. Jesse, thank
The
you
Bay
for
Area.
being here. Bay Area as well. You can, if you go there, you're driving your car, you can see Jesse on every now and then in a bus stop, right? Your sign is there everywhere, and you've been doing great, trying cases, also settling them when it's when the case needs to be settled, and also Jesse, you have been helping me a lot since we met. We met in TLU back in the day, and that's one of the things that people should know when you come to these conferences like TLU. You meet people like Jesse that has been very good referring me cases, and we're working in I don't have two cases together. And when I have a question, I call you. So thank you for being here today, Jesse.
Thanks for having me.
So Jesse, you were born where?
I was born in Santa Rosa, California.
Santa Rosa, and a family of how many siblings?
I'm one of five boys. I'm the middle. My father has two older brothers. One passed away last year, and then my two younger brothers. And so that's the four of us left. And then I have two sisters, a half sister from my mother and a half sister from my father.
Wow, big family. That's pretty rare in the United States, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So is it are they religious or
My mother is very religious. My
you're
mother is a Jehovah's Witness.
oh
So
wow.
my whole life, she's been a Jehovah's Witness, and she's, I would say, extremely religious.
Okay, were you ever involved as a Jehovah
I
Witness?
was from 0 to 10 years old. I went door to door, knocking on doors in a suit and tie in a small town.
That's amazing.
I
That's
thought it was.
awesome.
I think of it as very good sales training.
Right. And you were on your feet, right?
On our feet and in front of the door, opening a door to a new person each time, trying to offer them a product they probably didn't want.
Right, and that's basically what a trial lawyer does, right? I mean, you're selling your client's case in a way that you're conveying the story. Here, you're talking about the religion, something that you believe in. That I don't know how things change for someone who is, not involved as much or not at all. But you see it as a good thing, right? And what we are doing now as lawyers, we're doing a good thing for our client. So I feel like it relates a little bit.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I
Okay.
think I think the sales training, going door to door, being comfortable in front of people, being a people person,
Hmm.
being around a lot of people, definitely has similarities to what we do, and it helps obviously when you're going in front of a jury, when you're talking to your clients, having that personal touch, I think is super important.
Yeah.
So, but I don't. But the Jehovah's Witness Church is. I'm not a Jehovah's Witness,
Hmm.
and so as around 10 years old, I moved with my father, and that was the end of that. I
Okay.
never looked back. I never. My mother is, even though she's deeply religious and totally believes in her religion,
Hmm.
which is totally fine. She also didn't push it on any of the kids.
That's good.
She was like very like, if you believe in it, it's in your heart.
Hmm.
Great. If it's not, then it's not for you.
Yeah.
So it wasn't for me. It's not for anybody else. No one else in my family is a Jehovah's Witness, just my mother and my stepfather. So
Okay.
Need a trial lawyer who will fight for you? Call Lathrop Law Firm at 760-723-9612 or visit www.lathroplawfirm.com.
Well, that's fascinating. So then, until the age of 10, you go move with your dad. That's what happened.
I did.
And how is it that you decide to go to law school from your, you're a teenager, go to high school, then you go to college. When is it that you make the decision to start law school?
So when I went all growing up, my number one goal was to be a baseball player. That's all I cared about.
Were you good at it?
I was all right.
Okay.
I mean, like in the big scheme of things, I was all right. I was good in my town, but I wasn't, I wasn't scouted. I wasn't that big. When I got to junior college, I met, I went and walked on and I played a semester there. But my shoulder was already blown out. I have a massive rotator cuff. I was a catcher. And so when I got to the team, they were like, "What? You're a second baseman?" I was like, "No, I'm a catcher." And they were like, "No, no, no. That's a big guy's job." And
Hmm.
so the starting catcher was my roommate, and he was like 6'5", 240 pounds, like solid rock in the dorms. And I was like, I think I better go to law school. And so that was it. I knew I was going to be a lawyer in my head, like as a little kid. I've always argued. I've always been very, I love to read. I love to read. I read a ton of books. I think that that's, when I say argue, I should say I loved to be inquisitive and to question. And part of that definitely came from being raised a Jehovah's Witness, where as a little kid, you're kind of accepting of whatever's told to you. You're just taking it all in. But there was some point where me and the philosophy of what they teach totally conflicted. And so I was like, this doesn't exactly feel right. This doesn't sound right. And so I started being probably questioning authority at that point, questioning adults, and then being like, wait a second. Like, for instance, they tell every little kid there's no Santa Claus. So you're armed with like
That's
this,
sad.
you're
That sounds
armed
sad.
you're armed with this knowledge, and what you do with that knowledge as a little kid, you can be kind of, you can mess with other kids,
Right.
unfortunately, and I did that. But so they'll tell you there is no Santa Claus, but then also there's this Jehovah and there's this belief system they have. And so I was like, wait a second, like these adults believe this, or these kids think this, and the adults know they're lying, and then these people believe this. And I was like,
You were so confused, no?
as a little kid, I was very questioning. And so I think that questioning came to help me foster how I thought of things, and I liked getting to the bottom of stuff, and I was definitely questioning. So I think that also translated into being, having the lawyer mind, where you're inquisitive, not taking the first thing they're telling you as the truth, and always wanting to like uncover what's going on. So I did that, and I think that I knew that I loved to read, and I got a book one day when I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11. It was called The Law and You. And I found it and I read it, and I was like, I could be a lawyer. And I always loved TV lawyers. I hated bullies since I was a little kid. I always had the like philosophical tendency to care about the little guy. I always cared about the little guy. I always stood up to bullies. I always wanted to like stand up for other people. And I was also very outgoing because of the Jehovah's Witness thing. And also my father's like a country music musician. And so I was on stage at a young age playing music, singing with my father, my brother, and we would sing in front of, county fairs. And one time we sang in front of 10,000 people at the Cow Palace.
Wow.
The Arco Arena in Sacramento. And so we were like always in front of people. So that, I think those things I knew in my head, like there's trial lawyers from TV. That seems cool. I get to figure out things. And so in my back pocket, I always was like, I'll be a lawyer.
It sounds like you had all of the things aligning. So you had the skills that being developed, you had a certain attraction for a profession, and then it was just a matter of going to law school. So where do you go to law school? You go to law school in San Francisco, or
I did. I went to Golden Gate University, which is a law school in San Francisco, and I think it's on its last semester. Unfortunately, I think they're losing their accreditation. But I didn't go to. I didn't do extremely well in college. I was like frat guy. I was the president of my fraternity. I partied a lot, but I knew I was going to go to law school. And when I got into law school, the college I went to had a program called the Community Legal Information Center. And so my last couple years in college, I got serious about going to law school. And it was a lawyer supervised but student ran legal clinic that you gave the public legal information. You weren't allowed to give legal advice. You're not a lawyer, but you could give legal information. So there were all sorts of different departments, and I was one of the directors of basically the traffic department. So basically we explained people their legal rights when they would get traffic tickets or, minor infraction. They'd call in and we'd give them information. But I got to supervise other people, and I met a guy that still works for me now. He was the managing director of the whole program. And that we also got to hang out with lawyers. And so I think that was, some of the lawyers there were not my type of lawyers. Some were really fun trial lawyers. And there was a great trial lawyer who was a criminal lawyer, a guy named Dane Cameron. And Dane had a Corvette, which was awesome when you're like 21 years old. And there's this guy with a Corvette. And he wore nothing but three-piece suits. And he just looked like, your typical idea of what a trial lawyer is. And that, I think, solidified in my head, like, okay, this is for sure. We went to like continuing legal education courses in San Francisco with Dane, and he was a really just trial lawyer is trial lawyer. And so I barely knew him, but it was the impression that I got that it was like, okay, I could totally do that.
So then you graduate school, law school, and you start working. Where did you start working first?
So my first job, I actually was never going to practice law. When I was in law school, I have my father and the lady that I refer as my stepmother dated for a long time, and she runs a personal development seminar company. So I was kind of raised in that from 10 on. And in law school, I was totally focused on graduating and then working for the seminar business and eventually trying to run the seminar business. When I got out of law school, I did just that. I came down actually here to Corona Del Mar, and I lived there for 6 months. I lived in Denver for 6 months working for the seminar business. But I went back to San Francisco. I kind of missed the Bay Area. And when I was there, a buddy of mine from law school had a new friend who is a lawyer, and he had just graduated law school, and he started his own practice right out of law school. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And like, I felt that I wasn't on the right path and that I needed to practice law. So watching my friend's friend start his own practice kind of put the seed in my mind that, okay, I could just start my own practice, which I'd never really even thought of because I thought I was going to run this other business. So then I was living down here and I wasn't enjoying it. And I decided to move back to my hometown where the seminar business was, and I was going to open my law practice, which is in Lake County. So I moved back to Lake County. I worked for the seminar business part-time. I created my first business card, and on my business card it said criminal law, personal injury, and real estate. I'd sold real estate to pay for college and law school. So I was a real estate agent, real estate broker. I actually had a real estate school teaching college kids how to get their
I
license.
didn't know about. I
Yeah.
didn't know that about you.
Yeah, so that was my college jobs were I was a pizza delivery driver for Domino's. Then I was a telemarketer and I sold dual pane windows and vinyl siding. I set like appointments for people to get kind of hard sold by these salesmen. And then I got a real estate license, and then I sold real estate in Lake County, my hometown. And then I did that a little bit in college. And I did a fair amount in college, and I did it a little bit in law school. And then by the time I got into law school, I started working more for the seminar business part time. So I came home and I had this job still where I was working part time for the seminar business. So I started handing out business cards, and my first clients were my brother and his friend. They got busted getting a ticket for pulling abalone. We used to do abalone fishing, diving up in Mendocino. And if you have more than you're allowed to, they can give you a ticket. And they were like one over the limit, and it was very strict. So my first time in court was driving up to Mendocino to go to a DA's office and sit there, and like I was nervous. I didn't, and the DA was like, you're not the client. You can talk
Right.
freely with me about what this case is, and we'll get it resolved. I was like, okay, I could do this. So then I went to the courts, and I always wanted to be in court, and I went to the courts in Lake County, and I met in Lake County, they don't have a public defender's office. They have what's called an indigent defense fund. And so private attorneys from the area become the public defenders on a contract. So you're still a private attorney. You can still take cases on the side, and you are the public defender for the people that need public defender services. So I met the guy running the program. I gave him my business card. I said, hey, if there's any opportunity here,
How old were you at the time?
28.
Okay.
So I said, if there's any opportunity to get one of these contracts, I'd like it. I'm here. I'm a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. So maybe 3 months later, he gave me a call and offered me a position, and I took the position. So that was like 2009, basically, maybe 2010. And so I was a public defender for a short while, and we worked on cases, and it was mostly kind of just misdemeanor. It was all misdemeanor stuff. And so a lot of that is not really, you're in court, which I loved, and I realized I loved it. I got a lot of juice off it. It was
Right.
exciting. It was fun to talk. It was fun to cross-examine people. But so I would cross-examine police officers for like, misdemeanor stuff. They weren't trials. They were like just hearings. And then I got a call from a judge, and he said, hey, there's this case that's been around. It's a sexual registrant case. If this guy gets convicted, he'll be a sexual registrant. It's not a felony, but it's a very serious misdemeanor case. And he's had 8 lawyers. He's had 3 private attorneys. He went broke. and then he's had 5 public defenders, and this case has been around for like 8 years, and someone's going to try it. Do you want to try it?
What were the charges?
It was basically he had a inappropriate the allegation was that he'd had an inappropriate conversation with a girl in high school, and he was a high school security guard. And so his defense was, look, the school used me to go gather information, and they wanted me to do these things to gather information because these high school kids were doing all this crazy sexual stuff. And it turned out it was all true, and it sounded crazy because I was like, okay, like, why would they have you do this? But it turned out it was all true, and he was kind of being they were charging him with things that hadn't happened the way that they said it happened. So the judge called me. I came in. He showed me the file. I said, okay, yeah, I'll take the case. So then I took it. I met with the guy, and I said, we got to try this case. Like, there's no other way around it. The DA is not going to let him budge. He's not going to take any plea that requires him to be a sexual registrant. And so the good thing was that all the other lawyers had gathered all the information. So the file was already there and ready, and all I had to do was go and try it.
Was that your first trial?
That was my first jury trial.
Wow.
And it was against a seasoned felony attorney, and it took 30 days of 30 days of trial and a real jury, and he was going to be, a sexual registrant for life, which is, that's a death sentence basically. And so we put the case on, and it was an amazing experience. We defensed the case in 45 minutes. Usually when they come back that quickly, it's a bad thing, but we walked into the courtroom, and, he was terrified. And frankly, I thought, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
I thought I did a great job. And when I walked back in the courtroom, one of the jurors was smiling at me, like, big smile. And I was like, oh,
we did well.
We did well. Oh, they're going to defense this guy. We defensed it. Okay. And that was it. And then I was like, oh my God.
Right.
Like that first
so
rush.
the defense a case means you won the case.
Yeah,
Just for everyone who's listening,
yeah.
that is not
we won the case.
Yeah.
The guy was not guilty, and he wasn't guilty of that. He was guilty of a lot of other things that had nothing to do with crimes, but
Right.
he was, poor judgment, let's say. But he was put in a bad position, and the trial was wild. Like, I could tell, like, the trial story is absolutely hilarious. It was very crazy. So I cross-examined like 10 witnesses. I had people calling me after saying, like, the DA didn't tell it right. Like, I need to come back. So we had witnesses come back. The principal came in. The vice principal came in. The accuser came in, who was now an adult and still was very not pleasant. And one of my favorite parts of that was, I asked her, I said, okay, the villain in the case, this is true. The villain in the case was this boy that she had some type of relationship with, and his nickname was Johnny Vegas. And so the whole time I'm in the case, I'm like, you and Johnny Vegas were at a party in Christmas, right? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, and you and Johnny Vegas were friends before that? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. And you and Johnny Vegas went to a party together, and you and Johnny Vegas did drugs together, didn't you? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, and you and Johnny Vegas, you guys went in a room together, didn't you? Yeah. I said, and something happened in that room, didn't it? She's like, no. I said, all right, well, if something happened in that room and you didn't want to talk about it, you wouldn't tell your parents, would you? I wouldn't tell my parents. I said, okay. And you wouldn't tell the principal, would you? No. I said, and you wouldn't even tell this jury if it happened, would you? And she's like, no. Looked right at him. I was like, all right, well.
You got her.
We got that one done. And then they had tried to use pretext calls on him, meaning they had her call, the detectives had her call, and she didn't remember it. So she denied it ever happened. And we had the tapes. And then she denied that. The school had all these statements that they wrote about what happened, and then they all changed their story later. It was a total, like, cross-examination by fire. And that was the rush, was like, whoa, we just did this. Because if you looked at the file, none of this was in there. So we built this case during this trial and made the story of why he wasn't guilty of what they were charging him with. And so after that, the feeling of winning a jury trial was amazing, right. Especially when that's serious and 30 days and 45 minutes, they come out not guilty. You're like,
yeah, the whole process of building the case, which you in part had to do with, and then trying the case, and then the weight that you feel anxious, what's gonna happen. You didn't know what, and then getting the result. It was all like a quite an experience for you for the first time, right? And you get addicted to that.
Yeah, what I remember the most of the like not the funniest, but like maybe the most terrifying part of being a brand new lawyer in a courtroom where you're asking people to acquit someone who's being charged with a sexual registered crime. I was sitting there and the DA got up and she gave her closing argument, and it was really nasty. Like she brought stuff up that wasn't even ruled in, like that we'd had excluded, and she was just very, very. It was a nasty closing argument, like really bad, and I was like in my head, I was like, oh, this is crazy. Like, I got to get up now after that. And my client grabbed me by the leg and he was terrified. He's like, I hope you're ready. And I was like, all right. And I got up and I just, bam, did it. And then that was it.
You did a good job.
Yeah, I did a good job. So that got me hooked on trial. And then I thought I was, God's gift to trial, which is when you get into a civil case, it's totally different. Criminal law, you just have way more, you can play
the burden of proof.
Yeah, it's just way different. So then I started, through being a public defender, I had on my card criminal law, personal injury, and real estate. I stopped doing real estate stuff. At first, when I started my practice, I would do anything, right? Just to keep the doors open. Like I would take $250 and file like a nuisance claim against a neighbor for driving too fast down a dusty road. We did that case.
Wow.
So like anything, but what I realized was criminal law, it wasn't for me. They offered me a felony position and I didn't want to go to the jails. I had a really weird experience where I was doing the arraignments, and they would bring you into the jail, and the jailers thought it was hilarious to put me in the room with a guy who just literally killed a bunch of people and ripped them apart. It's called mayhem, where they rip the body parts apart. And he was like a Hell's Angel guy, and he was coming out of a heroin bender.
Yeah, no, you don't want to be.
And I was in the room with him, and the jailers, because I was like, I'm kind of funny. The jailers all gonna like to give me a little bit of, a little shit, and they put me in the room with this guy, and I'm like reading the charges. I'm like, what am I doing in here with this guy? And he wasn't that big, but he was a psychopath. He just murdered people, and he was high on drugs. You don't want
to get into hands.
I didn't have health insurance. There's no workers' comp when you're a public defender and you're on a contract. So I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm done. And the jailers locked the door behind me. Like, you go in there, you're his lawyer. And I was like, I had my pen and I was like, I have to shank this guy if he comes at me. You're stuck in the room with him, and he just ripped people's arms off, literally. And so after that, I was like, all right, I'm cool with spending my whole life.
Well, nothing happened there, right?
Nothing happened. Nothing.
Okay.
Well, he was very in like a psychotic mode, so it was just dangerous, and I hated it. And I thought, I don't want to spend the rest of my life being in a jail, dealing with this, having to deal with people. If you're a criminal lawyer, it's a very hard job, and you have to spend a ton of time in prison, and you're around people that are doing or may have done or may not have done, but it's not exactly how I want to spend my life. So I thought, that's it. I'm done with that. And through being a public defender, we had all these cases that would come in that were injury cases because those were our
they overlap.
So they would just call and they would say, hey, you're the only lawyer I know, and will you take my case for personal injury? So
okay, so you're not talking about the overlap between a criminal case and a personal injury case.
No.
You're just getting cases.
We were getting cases referred from the client base because we had about 1,000 clients that we represented as public defender. And so very quickly, those cases, I made my first hire. The first 3 people that ever worked for me still work for me, and it's been almost 15 years.
Wow.
And my first hire, Heather, we worked together out of my house, and then I asked her to go find an office, and we found this little tiny brick building, and it was probably like the size of this hotel room. Like, it was that tiny. And we put up a sign, and I spent like $6,000, which was all the money I had to my name, to like renovate it, put a new carpet in. I got a desk. This famous, in our region, famous criminal lawyer had passed away, and his wife called me out of the blue and said, hey, I want to give you his desk. And I got all this law office equipment, so will you take it? You just come load it up, and we got to get it out of the storage shed. So I said, great. So I went and got all this stuff, built this little tiny office, and then we literally sat, like, if you've seen this building, you can find it online. I could show you the address, but it's literally the size of this little tiny thing. And it had like one little office, a little corner, the fake little faux office. It's a nail salon now, like a little tiny nail salon. And I had, at one point, I think I had 6 or 7 people working in there, and we were like very cramped. And so maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us were working. That's how many we had in there.
Wow.
Maybe 6 even. I forget. But we started like moving couches to replace it with a desk. But we got through the public defender contract. We started getting personal injury cases, and then within like 6 months, we had made like 300 grand. That was what I recall in fees. So all of a sudden we had $300,000 sitting in a bank account. I'm like 28, 29. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go move to New York and be a stockbroker. That's it. Done. That was my like thought. I was like, all right, I'm out of here. And then I went and I kind of told a few people at the public defender's office, like, yeah, I'm done with that. I think I'm going to go just move to New York and like, get in the stock market or something. I don't know where this thought. I have some friends that live in New York, so I thought like, oh, I should go.
Yeah,
do
and
this.
you still go there, right?
I
Like,
do
you
go
spend
there,
some
and one
time.
of my good friends, I think, even put it in my head like, you should go be like a bond salesman or something. Like these guys are crushing it. And I was like, okay, so the thought occurred to me, and a judge heard about it from my hometown, and I went to talk to him, and he was like, you shouldn't do that. Like, you're a really good lawyer. You should stay here and do this and find this out. Like, you're having success. Why would you leave? And I was like, huh. And just having that conversation, I was like, okay, maybe I'll keep going. But I didn't know when we first started doing public defender work, personal injury work, I didn't know anything. The only job I had in law school that was legal was I looked in the phone book. My school required that you have credits that you do an internship somewhere, and they, the only interview they had was going into a room with 2 lawyers who had their desks facing each other. That's all I remember being like, oh, and I didn't even get the job. They were like, no, we're not hiring you. I was like, okay. So then the school's like, you still have to get an internship. So I pulled the phone book out and I just picked the guy that was on the front page in his law office. And I cold called his law office and just said, hey, I'm looking for an internship. And the guy that answered the phone had just posted an ad looking for an intern. And he's a good friend of mine, Wes Wakeford. And Wes was my like original mentor. And so the only experience I'd had doing personal injury work was working for like 3 months there. But I'd had the opportunity to write demand letters. So I knew like just the bare littlest amount of how to like turn a case into cash. And that's what we did. We just,
Right.
the first 3 months were just demand letters. I didn't know how to file a lawsuit. I'd never seen a lawsuit. I had no idea. So we did it. And we had some success on the demand letter writing. And that's kind of scalable.
Yeah, no,
So
for
it was
sure.
like basically had like a little pre-lit thing going. But I was never satisfied with that.
Injured and need help? Our lawyers at Lathrop Law Firm are here for you. Call 760-723-9612 or go to www.lathroplawfirm.com.
So why don't you tell whoever is not a lawyer, they don't know what a demand letter is, right? And if they are listening to this, so a demand letter, because in Spanish, a complaint, it's a demanda. And I know I have a lot of followers because I was born and raised in Chile. So some people who would listen to this, they're coming from South America, maybe from Europe, and they're not gonna understand what a demand letter is, which is not the same as a complaint, right?
Right.
So what a demand letter is.
A demand letter is the first opportunity made to an insurance company to resolve the case.
Right.
You provide a letter that is demanding for them to pay a certain amount, and you provide supporting documents that they can evaluate and what they call adjust the letter, and adjust the facts of the case to determine how much the case is worth.
Right.
And so that's what we were able to do, and we started doing it, and then very quickly, the thing that probably changed for me the most important education I got was a friend of mine. I started going to San Francisco trial lawyers things because I always had a place in San Francisco and I always had a place up north in either Lake County or now Napa Valley. And I always had back and forth. So I was always in kind of two worlds. And I started going to SFTLA events. I met some lawyers there. They were all very welcoming because our world of trial lawyers are always very, friendly and we want to share. And I was the new kid on the block. And so people were so nice to me, which is why I think, I like to mentor. And I think that's where it comes from. It was given to me.
Given to you.
Yeah. With nothing being expected, right? It was just like, here's the information. So a friend of mine moved to Austin and she then went to a seminar in Houston, and it was called The Reptile. And I had no idea what that was. And she called me out of the blue and said, "You need to be here. Come right now. I have a room. We have 2 beds. You can come and stay here, and we're going to go to the seminar." And I said, "Okay." And I just literally trusted her because she was a great lawyer. And I flew out and I went to the first reptile seminar. And that seminar was top.
Was it given by David Ball and
It was
Don
David
Keenan?
Ball and Don Keenan, and they'd just written Reptile, and David Ball had Damages.
Yeah.
But that book and that seminar
Yeah, that changed the game, really, right?
changed the game, changed my life, and taught me what the heck I was supposed to be doing. Because I knew the legal elements of a tort, but I didn't know why what we were doing was important. I didn't know how it affected the community. I didn't know how explaining what happened to my client and helping protect the community overlapped. And when I understood that, I went to all of reptile seminars. I went to every seminar that Don put on for like 3 or 4 years.
So, on a brief nutshell, one phrase so that everybody knows and are on the same page. What's the reptile theory?
The reptile theory, well, it's a book.
Yeah.
And the training, in my mind, the way that I interpret it all, because I'm not going to say what, you can read the
Yeah,
book
no,
and figure it
of
out.
course, it's a long thing to explain, but
Yeah.
I just want to give a brief idea of what it means so that they understand.
Basically, if someone is out there doing harm to people, either through negligence or,
Wrongdoing.
that creates a danger to all of us.
Right.
And in the reptile book, what they're talking about is helping the jury understand, in my words, this is helping the jury understand that what happened to my client could have happened to anybody else in the community because of this dangerous behavior. And when we see dangerous behavior, we don't like it.
We need to do something.
We need to do something about it. And the theory was like the reptilian brain sits dormant and quiet until it's threatened. And when there's a threat, at that point, we wake up and go, "Oh, wait a second. Hey, that could have happened to me. That could happen to my kids. That could happen to my family."
Right.
So contextualizing your case in that way helps you understand it. Now, there was a ton of other seminars about building the case, using systems failures, determining how to get the evidence you needed to prove that this was not just a one-off incident, right? Because the defendants always love, this is just a one-off thing. It has nothing to do with all these other choices that were made before. And it's just focus right here on this event. Don't focus on how it happened or why it happened. So that opened my eyes. And I started going to those seminars, and I flew all over the country on my own dime, and I would come back, and it literally armed me with how to build and litigate. And so knowing what you could do with it gave me the desire to learn how to be a top-notch litigator and how to figure out, how to gather all those bricks. I always talk about it's like being a builder of a house, brick by brick by brick, to put the case together. And you have to gather those bricks through depositions and through discovery and, getting all the documents out of the defendants that you need before you can set your case up. So when you go to just take depositions, you can just absolutely annihilate them. And that's usually the cases are over at that point, and they'll eventually settle. Or you have a great case for trial. Either way, you have to take those depositions that way, and you have to gather the documents first to do it, blah, 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 So I went to Reptile. I did that for a while. And then I actually, Nick Rowley was hitting and was starting to get a lot of notoriety. And I was a big fan, and I was reading transcripts from Nick, and I was trying to figure out, how did he get that knowledge? And then TLC was introduced. And I'd heard of Jerry Spence before, but I'd never been to any of his classes. I didn't know anything about how to go to the classes or anything about it, but I just finished up Reptile was a great foundation. I was like, what's next? So I went to a trial lawyers college class in Cambria. And at that class, I met a man named Dan Ambrose. And that's how I met Dan. And Dan was Dan then. But I knew that Dan had a magic to him, and he had like
he's the only Dan Ambrose.
He's the only Dan Ambrose, and so I was like, okay, this guy's got some knowledge.
Right.
And so Dan and I became friends. And Dan taught me what I think is one of my best skills at trial, which is how to do direct examination. And the direct that Dan showed me when he did it right on the fly in like this like little, I remember we were in this like the hotel's like lobby bar, and Dan was like doing these moves and doing this direct and just
Done
showing
being
me
done.
Dan being Dan. But I was like, whoa, like, I think at that point I was like 30 and I was like, this is great. And Dan taught me how to do direct examination. And I think I'm really effective at it. It's probably one of the best things that I think I have in my arsenal as a trial lawyer. And Dan taught it to me.
Wow, that's
So
amazing. Well,
shout out to Dan. Shout out to you,
shout
Dan.
out to Dan and TLU. We're right here in Huntington Beach in TLU. And you've been watching several people present, right?
Yesterday we did the class on scaling your law practice, and I've been doing this 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy that the things I learned were super needed for me right now because I've got I got 4 lawyers, including myself, and then about 45 staff. And so I'm almost to 50 employees, which is a crazy amount of people to have working for you. And at some point I got, we've had a lot of success, and success, like the tide, when the tide is in, you don't worry about it. But when the tide goes out, you see, all the issues. And so
Right.
with success, you don't have to always look. But this year I've been like, as I'm growing and bringing on all these employees, I'm like, okay, what's going on? I used to be very detailed about everything that was happening in the business. And now it's like, okay, we've got so many cases, so many clients that are really, really important cases that we're focusing on. But that sometimes that takes the eye off the business stuff. So it was great to be here and get that training from Dudley DeBouger, I think.
The Butcher, yeah.
Yeah, they were excellent.
They do elder abuse cases.
No, I didn't go to that. So I was here. I was going to go to that, but then I met another lawyer who has a great practice, and he said, we were at dinner, and he said, these guys are top-notch operators. You should go watch that. And I've known about the stuff they were teaching for a long time, but I've never found it, and I've never been to those seminars. So it was great. So, the thing I love about TLU is it's all the best trial lawyers from the whole country. It's not just CAOC. It's not just CALA. It's not just SFTLA. It's like a mini AAJ almost, where all the best trial lawyers are coming. And
Right.
and that's Dan's like genius. Like, during COVID, he really, I think, united us and gave us something all to focus on and watch. And blew up with case analysis and created TLU, and it's just been great. So this is my second time to TLU, and I give Dan a lot of credit for it because it really is a top-notch seminar and top-notch speakers, and you get to sit there and learn deep. Most of these seminars, I kind of got tired of going to seminars because it's the same kind of thing. There's a panel. I hate panels. How much are you going to learn in 15 minutes? And
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I was moderating a presentation yesterday, and the speakers sat down the four together, and Dan stumbled inside the room. I was like, opened the door and started yelling once the presentation was already on, and he got so upset that this looked like a panel. He
Right.
wanted it to look like someone, just one person presenting there, because he really tries hard to get away from that panel type of conference.
The panel to me is nonsense. When I sit and watch, if I walk in a room and there's a panel, I walk out because how much, I want to spend time with someone, just them. I don't need the panel is like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Right.
You just give me the good stuff. And that's what I feel like here. That's why I think that TLU is different, because you just get the good stuff and you can go, that was a 2-day seminar I just did. That was fantastic. And now I was watching Sean Claggett and Jordan, and they're in there spilling the real stuff. Like
Right.
that's why I loved the reptile seminars, because the reptile seminars, I realized they were really nuts and bolts, and they were like 3 or 4 days. And it was, you're getting this tool set taught to you. It's not just people talking on a panel for 10 minutes of different things. And, you come out of there just like, okay, like it was nice to see them speak. That was cool. But
Yeah.
what's the knowledge you're really getting? And as a young lawyer, I say that's the big difference.
So the things that you learned during these 3 days about how to scale your business, do you feel like you can just turn around and start Monday implementing all of this stuff that you've been learning, or is it something that it's hard to do from one day to the other? what are the tools that you go to start doing what you're doing?
Well, there's metrics and KPIs for running a law practice. And if you're not measuring certain things in your practice, then you can't manage them. And when you get a lot of employees, you have to have a system that basically is managing them for you. I have somewhat of that, but there's many things that I can do much, much better. And so I got skills and tools that are basically measurement KPIs to then implement. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, and that's basically what they said as well, which makes sense. But for me, it was giving me clarity into things that I hadn't known and weren't looking at. So now I can look at those things and I can give it to my team to say, okay, we have a goal of implementing this management technique in a year. It's going to take about a year probably. Okay, fine. So we go in and we implement it. So things don't happen overnight. When you're running a business, especially when you have that large of a staff, it's very easy to change things when it's just you and a couple staff. But once you get to scale, you have to take time.
Right.
So that's kind of moving the ship.
That's the hard part, right? To start growing and grow harmonically and with the same systems working for more people, right?
Yeah. So around 10 people, when it's you and 10 people, you know them, and they've been working with you. They've seen, how you want things done. But I've told you since the beginning, like the number one thing that young lawyers need to figure out soon is how to manage people, how to hire people, how to delegate. Because if you're a micromanager, you can only grow so far. If you have to control everything in your practice and how you're practicing law and you just hold on to it tight, that's okay. People do that. But I think for a business side, it's going to stifle your growth. And you want to be able to, in my opinion, you want to be able to share what you know, tell people why, let them understand why what they're doing matters and how it comes into the big picture. But you've got to be able to delegate, because so many of the tasks that we do, if you have a caseload, if you're the only one doing it, you're going to bottleneck. And you've got to get staff under you and you got to manage as soon as possible, because managing people is a whole other thing.
Right.
Running a business is a whole other thing. They always say like lawyers historically are horrible business people. That's what people say. I don't really necessarily find that to be true, but I do know that many of us are just focused on the law,
right,
and not focused on the business side. And that gives, that I think that's where that comes from. So if you're just focused on the business, that's what you're going to be focused on. But if you focus on the law and only looking at the elements and only doing the detailed stuff you have to do, those are two separate worlds. And so melding those is a challenge, but it's totally doable. And there's tons of lawyers out there who are great trial lawyers who also run businesses. Usually there's a business person and a trial lawyer, but there's a lot of operators that are doing it the same way.
So you've been growing harmonically. You're using all sorts of marketing strategies. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about these different Google systems and pay-per-click, etc. You also have been doing the billboard strategy as well, which has been working for you. What would be your recommendation for someone who is just starting with their firm and they want to start marketing and getting cases, getting themselves out there? What would be your main recommendation? How do you get to maybe emulate a little bit what you've been doing throughout the years? I mean, it's impossible to do the same, but what would be a step that you would take if it was your first step into that direction?
I think that spending money on advertising when you don't have any money and you don't have the systems in place to facilitate handling all the case intake and caseload is just going to create bottlenecks. So I think if you're just starting out, I think you're actually doing a great job by doing podcasts, using social media, stuff that may not have a big upfront cost, but they can get your name out. Finding a niche is also very important. We've talked about that.
Right.
You have to find a niche of people that are going to be fans of yours and that resonate with the message that you want to send to them. If you have a community of people that you're deeply involved in, then that should be where you start. You can always scale from there, but you have to have a niche and a network of people that will follow you and trust you and will hire you, and then it can grow holistically. I think that spending money on billboards, outdoor ads. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've spent millions and millions of dollars on outdoor, and I do big campaigns. So when you go to Northern California, you're going to see my face everywhere. That's intentional. but not everybody has, especially new lawyers, don't have the bandwidth, don't have the resources. And, that technique is like an old technique. Obviously, the internet is tremendously, that I think even like Google is like almost an older technique now. Like that's been around for a while.
Right.
So I think that one, the benefit that you have and younger lawyers have is I have no intention of making a podcast. I have no intention of going on TikTok. I don't have TikTok. I don't know what TikTok really is, except I've seen videos, but I don't go on TikTok. I go on Instagram,
Right.
but it's like,
Your personal Instagram is
yeah,
different
my
to-
personal, yeah, and I don't really do social media anymore. I used to do it. I probably should have people doing it for me, but I just, I don't like what Facebook became. I never really, I just kind of backed out because I used to be active on Facebook and I would post pictures of what we're doing at the firm and I would do it all myself. And then people started arguing back and forth about stuff. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
I really don't, even though I have my face everywhere, I really like my privacy. And I don't want to get in public fights with people over things that I think about because I don't think that, taking a position on things publicly necessarily is the greatest way to get clients. I don't think what I think matters as much as whether I can do a great job for a client. I think they have a great case. I don't think, I've had clients who've, when we'd be in court or something, they'll come talk to me about some political position or philosophical position, and I won't back down. I'll tell them what I think, and I watch their faces. They're like, "I thought you'd think this." I'm like, "Well, So
Right.
I just don't think that's necessary, and I think that turned me off to social media a long time ago. But I do think the younger lawyers have the advantage of you guys. There's an age group, like they called it like a migration, where like the different generations will go to different social medias, right? Like who's on Facebook really, like older than mine, and I'm 42. Instagram's kind of like got my age range, a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, but not much older. Maybe a little bit younger. Below that, you've got like TikTok, Snapchat, all this other stuff that like to when they talk to me about it, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I've had consultants come say, you need to get on TikTok. And I'm like, okay, like I could do YouTube, but oof, TikTok just seems so spastic to me. It's so
Right.
like it's so in your face. When I watch those commercials, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like,
Yeah.
it just
So
seems insane.
to me, it's when you see an attorney telling you if you got involved in an accident or you were in a store and you slip and fall, do this and hire us. That's not really giving value to the people. Like what you want is to provide, right, to the people and educate them in a way so that the attorney and whoever is not a lawyer that will need the attorney eventually knows what's going on a little bit more, because you run into these situations when you see clients or potential clients that really don't know anything about what's going on with their case, about what to do, and insurance companies take advantage of that. So it's breaching the gap a little bit, right? Yeah, I think that's a great thing about social media, that you're helping people, and then whenever they need an attorney, they have seen you helping them, right?
Yeah, I think that so when I first started doing advertising, my first advertisement that I ran on, the first way that I advertised wasn't billboards. The first advertisement I did was phone books because back in the day, phone books were like Google, right? So I bought every phone book in like 5 counties and I was on the front and back of all the phone books. That was the first way that we really started getting great cases coming off of the marketing. And the ad that I ran was a free insurance secrets hotline. And I had a free recorded call that people could call and listen to for free. And it had all like the 10 secrets insurance companies don't want you to know. And it was good information that would help them protect themselves against the insurance company. I had a TV commercial for that. So the first advertising I really did was really informational. I've never been a get you a bunch of money lawyer because I've always been a trial lawyer and I've had to stand in front of juries and every single person in the jury knows who I am. Has a preconceived belief of who I am.
Right.
So I tend to stay away from the get a check, in a wreck, get a check like that. That to me, coming from the reptile classes, they were really big. David Ball was really big on not creating an impression of who you are from marketing that was the antithesis of what a jury would want to give money for.
Right.
Right. If they just think of you as this like greedy guy, that's all money, 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 like those things that show like, I got a check and
Yeah.
I hate those commercials.
I
Like,
see. I see what you're saying. I mean, I feel the same way because our biggest argument against insurance corporations is that they see their insureds and the other side as a number, right? And we're saying you're not a number. You have feelings. You have a life that has value. If we start telling click here to see how much your case is worth, we're basically playing the same game that the insurance companies are playing, right?
yeah, I can't stand those advertising. I think those people should be sued because I actually think that non-lawyers doing advertising can be really problematic. There's many ways that they're your agent if you hire those companies, and lead gen companies that are doing things that are unethical. I think there's going to be a crackdown. I don't know when it's coming, and I'm not the one leading the charge, but I think there's so much stuff out there that's not true, and the role of the lawyer was never to have the consumer be confused or be lied to. Like, as a lawyer, if you said that stuff, you would be in trouble.
Right.
So the fact that the lead gen guys can get away with it, there'll be a day of reckoning, I think. And I think that for new lawyers, it's tempting to do that because it's easy. There used to be a trend of like holding big checks up. And as a trial lawyer, I would never want my clients holding a check because I don't want the public that I'm going to have to be in front of to associate me with, we're just here for a check.
Right.
We're just here for money. Like, because that's the antithesis of what you're going to do in front of a courtroom. So now, if you're never going to go in front of a courtroom and you're just going to refer it out to another lawyer, that's totally fine. But I've always marketed myself for my own trial stories, and I've panned my own caseload. I'm not a referral lawyer. I'm a guy that gets the cases in. We work them up. We find the best cases, and we spend our time working on the best cases. We have a big team that can handle pre-lit and handle. Many cases don't need that, but the cases that do need it, I can't ruin my reputation in front of a jury. And frankly, just having billboards, having advertisement is already giving them an impression.
Right.
So we have to deal with it in every case. And there's been maybe 2 trials that I've done where the jury didn't know me, and they were both way out of my. One was down here in Long Beach, and they had no idea. So it's nice.
Yeah.
But in Northern California, if I step in front of the jury, they're like, "Who knows, Mr. Chrisp?" Well, every single person.
Right.
And what do you think about that? And so I have to deal with it, which is fine. And I think as long as you're not in a wreck, get a check, click on this app and get $100,000 in 5 seconds, then it's okay. But that's a dilemma for, I think, young lawyers too.
Yeah.
Right? Because how do you
How
want
to start managing your marketing, your business? Because we're selling to people. Where it's not, that the question I get all the time is, I was working for this lawyer that Robert Jackson, and he's now thinking about retiring, and I'm staying in the same building with him, but I started my own firm, and everybody asks me, are you getting his book of business? And I say, what book of business? This is not like you have your company that you work with, like I used to when I was working in big law, where you see the same client over and over again. This is like someone getting sick, going to the doctor, and then hopefully we're not gonna see that person again because we don't want that person to get involved in another, unfortunate event. So you need to be out there and you need to do these things to get to the people, right? And that sometimes is hard to understand for people that are not lawyers, and they see lawyers have their clients and they stay with their clients, like consigliere, right, type of
right?
situation.
Yeah, definitely in this business that you will get repeat clients. That if you've been around long enough, that does happen, and you definitely want referrals from the clients that you served really well. But your hope is, yeah, you'll never see this person again because many times you're dealing with this horrific incident that's
Right.
happened for them, and hopefully that doesn't happen. Do you want them to refer their cousins and friends over if this something happens to them? Of course you do. That's the business of it, right? But the residual coming off of your referrals is not. That's not something you can count on.
Right.
You got a different line of work. It's not. You're not a dentist where they know who their dentist is and they're
Right.
going to have other cavities guaranteed. So you're really creating a new relationship, and it's relationship based, and that's where
You're like an oncologist, I would say. Like
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
like you don't want to see the oncologist again. Right?
Yeah, well, like Chris Dolan has a great commercial that I always love the line, which is the best lawyers we hope you never need.
Right.
And I always thought, oh, God, that's a great line, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
true. And I always tell people, I hope you never call me, because I'm introduced to someone and like, oh, you're a personal injury lawyer. I'm like,
yeah.
yep.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to hire. I don't want you
I
to
don't.
hire
I
me.
hope you never
Yeah.
call me. I
Yeah.
hope you never need my services, because what I do is deal with the worst of the worst things in the
Hmm.
world that happen to people. And so, how do you create the relationships with your niche? And that's really what I think the young lawyers should focus on.
Hmm.
How do you figure out who your niche is first? Like, right, we've talked about that. And then how do you get in front of them as most often as possible? And also keep your integrity so that if they do need you, there's a million lawyers they can choose. Why will they choose you? Why will they trust you? And it usually comes from years of hard work and experience and treating people right. But also, like, not every case needs a trial lawyer, or not every case needs a senior trial lawyer. They might need a new lawyer,
Right.
because many clients will be better served by someone who has the resources and time, maybe resources, the time, to talk to them about their, 5 mile an hour rear ender case where they got chiropractic treatment. Their concerns are just as valid, but that may not be the case that, you know, they need a trial lawyer explaining what's going to happen in jury selection. It's just not necessary.
Right.
It's never going to go that far.
Hmm.
So
So Jesse, you're still trying cases, right?
I am.
Even though you're growing, 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 you're one of the few. You have one of the few firms that advertise are out there in billboards,
Yep.
but still try the cases, right? Because we were going over this with Giorgio and Harrison on another podcast. There are different stages, and there are some practices that stay in just one stage of the different, three that there are, right? The pre-litigation, litigation, and trial. But
Yep.
in your firm, you do them all, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have people doing the pre-lit for me, and I have people doing, basically, the lawyers at my office are defending depots, prepping witnesses for depots for non-major cases, and uh, doing CMCs, mediations, resolving cases around, that are less than a certain limit. When you get a really serious case and it comes in the office, if you're a young lawyer and you're only pre-lit, well, then you're going to have to share that fee with an older attorney or a seasoned attorney, which I actually think is a great idea, and that's a model that's viable. Chris Dolan, again, I'll say his name again, was one of my mentors and one of my kind of archetypes. I watched how Chris did it. Chris is a world class trial lawyer, first and foremost. And then he built a great business around that. And I tell him all the time that, I basically just copied what he did. And that's how I thought it was supposed to be done. I thought you had to be a great trial lawyer to market, because why would you market yourself for something that you can't do? But it's now I know that not everybody has to be a trial lawyer, and
Right.
not everybody's going to be. And so it's fine that there's people out there marketing. But for my firm, I've always marketed for my own trial stories. And I wanted to get those big cases in the door. And then I work exclusively on the big ones. Now I also have to run the business. But I stay focused on, the major cases that are in my office, and work to build those stories, and, do the hard work of litigation, and going and dealing with experts and kicking their butts at depositions so that they'll either settle, or if we go to trial, we have a winning story to tell. So yesterday, Ben Cloward called me a unicorn, and I was like, huh? He's like, yeah, great trial lawyer and great marketer. And I was like, oh, that's so true.
Yeah, yeah.
What I get, the one compliment I get that makes me proud is that there's this really good defense lawyer in our neck of the woods who is very, very dangerous. And I would be very cautious, for young lawyers, you should recognize the difference between a great defense lawyer and a mediocre or crappy defense lawyer. And the sooner you recognize that, the more money you can make, because you're not going to make a lot of money off the great defense lawyers. You might, if you have a great, great case, they'll get it settled for you. But this lawyer is an excellent defense lawyer. And, like the velvet glove, I would refer to him as, like, he'll stab you in the back with a velvet glove on his hand. Like, it'll be smooth.
Hmm.
But he told another judge that's a friend of mine that Jesse's the only one who does the work, markets, but does the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's made, in Northern California especially, reputation up there, it's everything. Down in LA, there's a lot more lawyers, there's a lot more defense lawyers, a lot more plaintiffs lawyers. But in Northern California, it's really a small community. And it's more of a grouping of small communities.
Right.
Like San Francisco's its own community, Sacramento's its own community, North Bay is its own community. They're very small, and the adjusters all know who people are. And they know if you're a lawyer, from out of town, just like if I was down in LA going in on a case in Bakersfield, well, they're not going to necessarily know me. But Northern California is very nichey like
Yeah, I
that.
feel with the exception of San Francisco, the rest of the areas are very spread out, right? And
Yeah.
very isolated one from the other. And that's how basically we got closer because when I was in my old firm, we were handling that case that you referred to us, right?
Yeah, the fire
The
cases.
fire cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen your marketing in the marketing that you do for other lawyers, and you say there, if you have a trial in a rural county, I am your guy. So why is that, Jesse? Why is it that you do well in these rural areas?
I think it's for the same thing I just said, which is that the adjusters know me. I've been doing it for a long time. I've dealt with them many, 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 many times, the senior adjusters particularly. So if they, they'll just call me. If I'm on a case, sometimes they'll call me and just tender the policy. Even on like seven-figure cases, they'll just call me like, "Hey, you're on the case. Here's the money," because they'll know what I'll do otherwise. They'll
Right.
know I'll try to open the policy up. If a case can't get settled, and I'm actually doing less than this because I've got so much work right now, and it's got to be a really good case. There's a couple lawyers in LA that call me and refer me cases, and I'm getting involved very, very. I'm very picky at this point. But if it's a great case, with a seven-figure fee or above, I'll still look at it. If there's enough meat on the bone for all of us to make money on it, and it's a great case and it's going to be a good story, then I can help add value. What I don't do is take cases that I can't add value, or that expert depositions have been messed up, or they haven't they didn't get the right experts. That I can't really fix a case, or I don't want to fix a case at that point. But in those counties where I am from, I make a joke that it's like the state of Jefferson. Up north, there's a whole different vibe. It really is a different place, and there's just subtleties in the courtroom that if I wasn't from there, I would be weary of. And I've always watched lawyers from out of town come in that, sometimes they have great success. Great trial lawyers, that's the thing. A really great trial lawyer is going to be a great trial lawyer anywhere. So
Yeah.
it's not like I'm saying I'm the only one up there, or that, no other trial lawyers can come up there. That's not true. But for most younger lawyers who have cases that are doing pre-lit or litigation, they will have a lot of difficulty up there. Uh, Plus, it's really far away. And like, do you want to go stay up there for a month in a
Right.
hotel, totally away from your family? Those are most of the calls I get,
Mhm.
frankly, are, "Hey, I got these cases. We do pre-lit, or we litigate, but we don't want to try it. Will you take a look at this case? It's in, Eureka, or it's
Right.
in Mendocino, or it's in Butte County or Redding." And I've grown
Humboldt
up,
County,
yeah, Humboldt
like
County,
that
like,
case I had.
yeah, I've grown up there. I know all those counties. I've just been there my whole life.
Right.
And I'm from Northern California. And when I talk to the jurors, I know who they are.
How they think.
I know how they think, and I either know them, which has happened more often than you'd believe, or I know exactly, what their life was like and what's important to them. And I know how to avoid mistakes, or how to, it really is just like, it's like the Southern lawyers. They're all so charming,
Hmm.
and there's a bit of that in Northern California where it's a little slower. So I just think resonating with those jurors, having a local advantage, is is beneficial.
Okay, but to set the record straight, when you know the jury, juror, you let the judge know. I mean, like, you're not supposed to know the jurors, right?
That is up to the defense lawyer. It's certainly going to be talked about. I
Right.
had on a case that we set the record for the jury verdict. The principal of my high school was the foreperson, vice principal, and she used to discipline me, and I was not. I've always been a bit of a anti-authority figure. Not now as much, but when I was younger, I definitely had that like strong anti-authority vibe. And I would get in a lot of trouble in high school. And I had to ask her, you know, I didn't, first off, I recognized her, but I didn't recognize her name. And then when I was talking with her, I said, you disciplined me. We don't know each other as adults, but here I am presenting this very serious case, and you're on the jury panel. And I remember you as being someone who was thoughtful, and someone who was, a person who took great care in what happened. You were very careful, and you really cared about the kids. But I was one of the kids that I if you recall, got in a lot of trouble. And she was like, I remember you. And everyone laughed, and it was like, okay. And I said, well, with those memories, my concern is that if any of them were, not great, then you're somehow going to hold that against my client because
Right.
he picked me as his lawyer. And she said, well, Jesse, I'll be praying for you. And I went, okay, I don't know what that means. I didn't dig any farther,
Right.
but I always knew that she, was a fair person.
So in that situation, the defense attorney can,
He can ask.
kick that
Totally.
juror out of the jury, right?
Looking for dedicated legal support? Contact Lathrop Law Firm at 760-723-9612 or check out www.lathroplawfirm.com.
It's a level field because the other attorney also has the right to kick the jury, the juror, if he doesn't like what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Because like for people who don't know about this, they say, well, how is it possible that the principal of Jesse's school stayed in that jury,
I let me put it this way.
in that panel?
No choice stressed me out more than leaving her on as the vice principal, knowing that I had knew her as a kid.
Right.
Nothing terrified me more. In hindsight, I would never do it for me. Now it turned out it was great, and
Okay, so you won that case.
we
It
won
was
that
a
case
good
and had a great verdict, and she was the foreperson. But I was terrified because I knew she's probably going to be the foreperson, and she didn't give me any inclination like, you know,
Yeah.
saying I'll pray for you doesn't mean
Right.
I'll pick your case.
So you did the right thing. You disclosed that you knew that this juror, and then it's on the defense, handling it whatever way they want to handle it.
I think her juror questionnaire was so pro defendants that they were like, that's who she is. And frankly, I didn't know her as an adult. So
Right.
they weren't wrong. And it was a big risk on our part. And I was very, very worried. It was probably the most concerning choice I made was leaving her on because it was such a wild card. Like, why would I want that in my own mind, right? Having to deal with that fact. So I wouldn't do it in hindsight, but it wasn't the only jury. I've had basically someone on the jury that knew me personally, or like one jury had my little league coach on it. And I didn't remember him, and he remembered me, and I kind of knew who he was, and I remembered his name. And he got on, and we got defense in that case. So you never know.
Right.
But obviously, the defense knows that they know you, but that doesn't really, it doesn't really mean anything if you
Yeah,
don't
when-
know
when
them.
it's
If you're
such
not
a-
friends, when you knew someone in a small town growing up.
Small town, yeah.
I've been on juries where I've had people I used to work with were on the jury. It just doesn't matter if you're not personally friends with them, and you don't know, and they don't really know you. It doesn't really matter as long as it's disclosed. But I would say now, up north, every single jury knows who I am, so that's just an impossibility.
Right.
Not they're not going to know me personally, but they'll have seen my advertising, and that's the risk of doing the big outdoor. But it's a risk I'm willing to take.
So you were addressing a little bit the reptile theory, and it came to me this thought that I've had for a long time because before moving to the U.S., whenever you would sue someone for money, which is what we do now, if someone dies, money is not gonna bring back that person, right? If the family is very wealthy, a member of that family dies, which happened with a family friend, down in Chile. And I was thinking to myself and telling my parents they should sue because if they don't sue, this is gonna keep happening, right? So I feel that feeling of what's good in suing, in getting involved in a lawsuit, in a civil lawsuit where what I'm going to get is money. Why is that going to make a difference? That perspective aligned with the reptile theory makes a lot of difference because you're making a change in society. If you don't hold someone accountable, right? You're not
Absolutely.
going to change these behaviors from repeating. And if you're not doing it for whoever died or suffered this injury, you're doing it for the next person, right?
Absolutely. So our system of checks and balances requires that plaintiffs' lawyers are basically safety enforcers.
Right.
That's what we're really doing. That's what the reptile taught me, is that we're safety enforcers. We're prosecuting unsafe behavior.
Right.
And so it's not necessary. And in America, we're a capitalist society, so the scoreboard is monetary. And if you want something to change, you have to make the penalty something that is not enjoyable. Well, nobody wants to give up money, right? Nobody, no companies, no person, nothing. So the penalties align with the lack of safety and the desire that we have of having a safe country. I've been all over the world, and I've been to places that don't have a tort system. Many, most don't have what we have. And I can tell you that we keep our country the way it is, safety-wise, because we have plaintiffs' lawyers who are contingency lawyers doing it. It's a wild system.
I agree with you.
But that's the net result, is that we live in a safer country.
People are careful.
People are careful. Yeah. You're careful because there's a penalty, and it's a penalty you don't want to pay.
Right.
You know, you don't want to be sued. You don't want to have to pay money. Now, money, what else can we do? That's the only way we can equalize.
Justice is not perfect, right?
There's no perfect system.
Right.
But everybody all over the world has a different system. And I'll tell you that I think that ours is the best. It's not perfect, but I would take this system over any other system there is. And I just think that at the end of the day, if you live in America, you have to be careful because we're out there. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
You take it away, and it's a very different country, and it's a dangerous place. And, with tort reform and all that, that's big business's agenda. But at the end of the day, what small town jurors are going to care about is, can this help my community be safer? And that is where the reptile helped me to formulate how to think about what we do.
Right.
How do we make our community safer?
It changes the approach.
Totally. This isn't about money. This is about making the community safer. And the money is just the voice of the jury and saying how much they want that safety to occur.
Yeah. Wasn't Keith Mitnick that said an eye for an eye back in the day? Now we don't do that because it's barbaric. Now the most the closer things we have is money. It's not perfect, but it's something, and at least detracts people from doing what's wrong again, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, at some point when you've been doing this long enough, the thing that you'll get is what we do really does matter. It really changes how people behave. And also the thing I still love doing is giving someone life-changing money,
right?
Because then they can relax. And this horrible things happen to them. And now my buddy from Finland calls it, we're Robin Hood, right? We're taking from the wealthy insurance companies, giving to the poor, we're giving to whoever. But I always feel like we're doing the right thing. And when you give someone life-changing money, when they've had a catastrophic injury or a wrongful death, that feels amazing. When you can change their life, and, hopefully they let you structure it and put it in a safe way that it can provide for them and their family the rest of their life, that's still fun. That still gives you juice after all these years. Yeah. And so, that's it.
All right, Jesse. Thank you so much
Thanks, buddy.
for being here.